Hello and welcome to Gardener's World. Would you believe I've been here now for 18 months and it's the second summer and I do feel this garden is becoming mine. I put a lot of work last year into the soil, a huge amount of organic matter, and this year, though everything was slow to get going, I feel even the plants that were here are happier. I'm just tidying this rose. So this is Rosa Malvern Hills. It's a beautiful old rambler that's soft, yellow, musky. But a little tip here. The posts, I've put 2 vertical wires on, and a lot of the time we don't bother doing things like that. And then we wrap the roses around, and then you want to prune it, or something dies and you're untangling this mess. If you put 2 eyes either end and then just stretch a really thin piece of galvanised wire between, and now I can just tie in. And what it means is that if I need to maintain, I need to do a bit of pruning, I can literally just untie this thing, and instead of it being a matted mess, they'll just fall apart nicely. Now, coming up on today's programme, Nick marvels at an incredible collection of flowering dogwoods.
Look at this absolute beauty. This is Cornus kousa Mistletoe, and it's the pinkest of all the Cornus. Now, like its brethren, it comes from Asia and it's a deciduous shrub.
We meet a woman who found inspiration in a book, which has driven a lifelong passion to garden.
I just love being in the garden because when you're in the garden, the world's all right and you're happy.
Toby visits a suburban garden that's taken water gardening to another level.
When did you decide to put your garden in the corner of a pond?
I grew up in Holland fishing from when I was very small, walking around the pond's edges with a net. So when it came to making a garden, I think for me that was the first thing that I wanted to do, was like have water plants and ponds everywhere.
And I will be adding some late season colour and some evening scent. As you know, I'm always looking for an opportunity to add some plants. And these hawthorn hedges were originally put in to divide the space. But when I moved in, they were overgrown and this was dark and dingy and you didn't really want to come up to the greenhouse. So the first year what I did was I cut them all back. Did it work? Not really. So what I did is I decided to lift the canopy here and underplant. And I loved it. But then I moved over here. Sat down, because this is where I want my tables and chairs, and looked back. I looked back and that looked really good. But then the hedge behind was a green stop. So I started lifting the canopy on that one. And you know what it's like, you start a job in the garden and that leads on to another one and another one. And I think the garden starts to tell you what it needs. I lifted that, it looked fantastic. And so that led me to here. If you imagine when the hedge was here, it was old, dead, but I had about a foot to plant in. So I started lifting the canopies and now I've got over 1 metre. So what I want to do now is just that last little bit. Time of year, if you're going to do anything like this, you know, check through the hedges, and I have hugely. You know, there's nothing in here, there's no nest, no sign of any birds. And all I'm doing now is taking that right back to the stem and just lift that canopy. So there you go. I actually think the stems even look great. So later on, I'm going to be adding some planting, I suppose, to an area that a lot of us would think was challenging. But don't worry, I've got a plan. And now we have got a treat for you. Nick has gone to Newby Hall in North Yorkshire to check out a wonderful collection of summer flowering trees.
If you're searching for something really floriferous at this time of year, a great choice for medium gardens is a Cornus kousa. Native to Japan and Korea, it's a species within the genus Cornus, which is commonly known as the flowering dogwood. Cornus kousa are hardy, slow-growing, either large shrubs or small trees. They tend to start out pretty columnar in their youth, and then as they mature, they thicken and branch out. This is the straight species, and like the rest of the group, they appear to have these huge white petals. In actual fact, these are a series of bracts or modified leaves. The flower itself is that tiny little thing in the centre. They're not particularly commonly grown in the UK, but actually they do really well here. Look at this absolute beauty. This is Cornus kousa Miss Satomi, and it's the pinkest of all the Cornus. Now, like its brethren, it comes from Asia and it's a deciduous shrub. Now, looking in a bit more detail on the flowers, you can see in the centre here these clustered blooms. As you move into autumn, they become pendulous fruits which hang off the plant, and they look like a raspberry that's been inflated. Really extraordinary look, and a beautiful plant in many seasons. Cornus kousa is a plant that really catches the eye. While the flowers are minuscule, the abundance of showy bracts will give a garden stunning displays of colour in late spring and summer, which is followed by magnificent foliage and fruits in the autumn. If you've got a bit more space in your garden, then it's seriously worth considering growing this. It's Cornus Normanhaddon, and it's one of the most popular of all the Cornus. See, it's got that wide spreading format to it, and it's got an AGM, which is an Award of Garden Merit, which is issued by the RHS. And what it means is that it's a good, tried, tested, solid plant. It's got one of the biggest sets of bracts of any of the Cornus. What's really interesting is if you look at the actual flowers in the centre, each one of those is also arranged in a tiny little cross. Here at Newby Hall, over 100 specimens of Cornus have formed a national collection. They've been under the care of gardener Ed Round, who's been working here for 17 years. So, Ed, you've got quite the collection here.
Yes, we have roughly 100 different plants composed of at least 70 different cultivars and 30 species.
So how did it all begin?
Well, it was really all down to the plantsman and owner, Robin Compton, who inherited 3 old plants in the garden, one of which was quite an ailing Cornus florida rubra, and we still have the 2 kousas growing strongly as we speak. The Cornus florida, unfortunately, we have lost.
I've experimented with Cornus florida in the past, and I know lots of other gardeners are a bit wary about it because there are particular challenges with growing it, right?
Yes, yes. We found that most of the North American species have actually contracted a disease called Discula destructiva, which is anthracnose, and it really disfigures the growth and stunts the growth of most of the North American Cornus, Florida being particularly badly hit.
Now, of course, Cornus kousa is Asian and doesn't have any such problem. So in terms of getting them to establish and making sure they're really healthy, what's your guidance on that?
Well, to be honest, it's actually a very easy plant to accommodate, providing you give it shelter and it's not really in too heavy a soil.
And it's sort of often being excessively wet at the root that can be a problem, but there's a way to mitigate that, right?
There is, yes. I mean, if you've got heavy soil, I mean, the ideal answer is to plant on a slight mound. It's a bit counterintuitive and it goes against what you're always taught, but actually only bury the root ball 2/3 of the depth. That way you're actually planting on a slight mound, and then you actually cover over what's remaining with a good mulch and keep that mulched for the next few years, just until the plant gets established.
And my understanding with the kousas is that they tend to be happier in either a neutral or slightly acid soil?
Yes, you tend to want to avoid chalk or limestone. They are actually relatively tolerant, but as you say, they don't like really strongly alkaline soils.
I love this combination just here, this really bold kind of bluey glaucous-leaved hosta, and I think it looks fantastic with this cornus. This is one called Beni Fuji. It's got that sort of mid-pink note to its bracts. It's also got some very distinct qualities as a shrub. It has a sort of almost, I don't know, Japanese maple look to it. It's got those beautiful layers that sort of stack up through the plant. Of course, they're absolutely capped with flowers as well. And then looking at the individual blooms, as they progress further back into the plant, they get paler and paler and paler, so they're really white right in the centre. And this is one of the smaller Cornus kousa, so it could suit medium or even small gardens. It gets about 3 by 3 metres. When it comes to the foliage, you'll find variation in colour and form, from lime and tiny to deep blue-green and pendulous. This is Cornus Madam Butterfly, and it's a newish introduction, and it's one of those plants that really suits a larger garden because it goes up to about 6 metres. Now, of course, Cornus kousa are renowned for their fabulous and dramatic bracts, but actually lots of them look good in other seasons as well. And so you can see here, this particular specimen has a beautiful patinated bark, and that gets better and better with maturity and the more light that hits the base of the shrub. So if you're looking for a small tree or a large shrub that will provide you fantastic flowering in late spring and summer, followed by spectacular autumn colour and fruits and bark, then Cornus kousa is the plant to go for.
I would love to grow Cornus kousa, but my soil is clay on a limestone bed, so this is very alkaline. So for me, it's this little beauty, which is Cornus controversa, which is the wedding cake tree. Got that wonderful tiered habit and these dark stems. Look stunning all the way through the winter months. Then it comes into leaf and then flowers, a sort of a mass of white petals. As they go, they're followed by a dark berry. But if that's not your thing, you could try something like Cornus mas, which is our native Cornus, grows in the hedgerows, but it's got a winter flower, followed by a berry that ripens and turns deep red, and then on top of that, the autumn colour is great. But remember, any of the shrub or tree planting that we did in the autumn, last winter, or this spring, when the weather gets hot, those plants are really going to stress. And so it's going to need water. So if you look closely, those leaves are just starting to droop, but that can of water tomorrow morning, these will be bang, up and at it. One thing from moving into this garden that I really wanted to do was add more diversity of planting. So I decided to play with meadow turfs, but maybe in smaller spaces, just to try and demonstrate that you didn't need rolling acres. And here, I just laid a wildflower mix. It's been incredible. But I think in reality, partly some of that is the slow start in the season. The turf had enough time to root itself down and we had a lot of wet weather. But look at it, oxeye daisies, plantains, beautiful shapes. So I'm just letting it do its thing. And when it's finished and it's all ready to seed, I'll cut it back. You might remember back in March, I decided to take the lawn up and lay an unkept lawn. The mix of wildflower and grass is in the middle, but with a lovely little border around the edge of good quality turf, just so it picture frames it. And it looks like I've done it on purpose. But about 4 weeks ago, I started experimenting with when to cut, when not to cut. And I think I let it grow about 2 weeks too much. And then I took the top of it, and then it didn't rain, and then it went brown. But it's coming back again. And the fascinating thing is, the wildlife is incredible. And I think it's a lovely contrast to the colour out there. This is more of a sort of green tapestry, shapes, forms, but the wildlife come in and love it. The other bit that didn't work, obviously, is I thought my lovely dogs that mark the lawn constantly would do their business on the middle bit and maybe I wouldn't notice, but no, they choose the lovely cut bit all around the edge. But all I'm going to do is rake the surface, mix up a tiny little bit of topsoil and some seed, and then just sow it over the top, water it in with a watering can, and to be fair, this time of year, a couple of weeks, it will be back green again. Now, we have one of your films. We're off to meet a couple that proves exactly why grass is the most successful plant on the planet.
Hello, we're Ruth and Pete from near Bridport in Dorset.
We're high on a hill on the coast, and our garden is subjected to really fierce, salty coastal winds, so quite a challenge for gardening.
I'm trying to remove these turds without the other gardener knowing what's going on. So now I'll show you what I'm actually going to be using them for. Basically, I'm going to use it to clad this section of exposed stone wall. And I've got an old shelf bracket here which I've cut in half, and a piece of our old music stand. So we're going to hammer these in and make sure these turfs stay really well on the surface. We've also got a decent root base on them as well to get them really well established. There we go.
You may be thinking, will this actually work, this patchwork quilt? 6 weeks on, the rain has arrived and it's transforming it. We've had some amazing wildflowers already, including red campion, comfrey, brown-leaf geranium, cut-leaf geranium, herb robert. It's absolutely alive with insects. We're really pleased with it. It's worked really well.
So, 2 years on, the vertical meadow that we planted has established itself really well.
We hope you liked our vertical meadow. Bye!
That absolutely blew my mind. There's me thinking I've got a few levels to deal with in my garden, but that vertical, that was incredible. But also it's a great reminder that plants never cease to surprise. Look at that. I thought I'd lost it. Yes, the succulents went, but the ginger has come back. And this is an area that we come to at the end of the day, watch the sun go down. And actually the planting in general is coming into its own now. The spikes of that Nephophia just popping up and working their way through. But also things like the verbascum, even the wild geranium, have seeded around, and that just gives it a life of its own. But it definitely lacks scent. So what I'm going to do over there is put an evening primrose. Fantastic scent. That'll grow to just over 1 metre. Beautiful yellow cupped flower. It's a biennial, so it will seed around after it flowers. But for a shady spot, what we're going to go for is tobacco plant. So Nicotiana sylvestris. This will grow to about 1 metre, lovely long tubular flowers. And in the evening, the scent is incredible. And it's an edge of woodland plant. So it deals with this wonderful sort of dapple shade. I treat this, I suppose, really like a short-lived perennial. If we have a really sort of mild winter, it'll probably stay. One of the things I love about this plant is it has sticky leaves. Not only are those leaves sticky, but when you plant that, you can get a slight scent. But when it flowers, it's a treat for the senses. That little bit of scent will add another complete dimension to this space and make it even more special. Now, we're off to Gloucestershire to meet a woman who definitely knows how to get the most out of her garden.
I just love being in the garden because when you're in the garden, the world's all right and you're happy. And that's one of the most important things, I think, that to be happy in a garden. And my garden makes me happy. I'm Brenda Salmon, and I've been gardening here for 13 years now, and I love every minute of it. I just love colour, and in everything I do, colour matters. We've got a good variety of colour out at the moment, and a lot of things I love. Lupins are out, the delphinium's out, my favourite little aquilegias. I love the aquilegias, they come up so unexpectedly, and they just give that little zip to the garden. I only started gardening because I lost a baby when I was quite young, and my husband brought me a book in while I was in hospital, and it was We Made a Garden by Marjorie Fish, and I was just blown away by it. From that moment I knew I must garden, not just would garden or wanted to garden, but I knew I had to garden. This bit of the garden is my polite garden, so when people come, they feel nice and relaxed and comfortable. And then what I enjoy most is when they go through the gate to my impolite garden, and you hear as they go through, oh, wow. It clashes, red, orange, yellow. And that's what I love about it. I love the fact that it makes people say, wow. I don't think I could have a garden that didn't have roses in it. I think roses make a garden, really, and I have got an awful lot of roses in this garden. This rose gives you everything. It comes out quite early, and it carries on most of the summer, and you can see how many flowers I've still got coming. It's called Crown Princess Margarita. You can see why she's a crown princess, can't you? Because she is really rather beautiful. To me, it's perfect. My husband was Graham. He was the best husband one could ever hope to have. We started going out in 1947 when I was 12 and he was 14. We had 73 years together before he died 2 years ago. So he just sits on my shoulder and tells me what to do. I need to use the chair because I can't stand very much any longer. And like this, I can garden. It doesn't stop me gardening. I can clear all the rubbish like this, and I can use it high, or I can have it low, and I can do things along here. Because it wheels around, I can move myself, you see. Well, I have to sometimes stand up and do it, but there you are. Just hang on to it, and I'm off to the next one. One day a week, John comes in to help me in the garden. He is a brilliant gardener, but he's also a brilliant friend.
We put some tomatoes in this time.
I know.
Now the tulips have gone and the dahlias have gone.
And these are onions, aren't they?
These are big onions, yeah.
Yes, great. He's always there when somebody needs him. Just not for me, but for everyone in the village. He's one of those people who you can always rely on.
All right.
Good. Brilliant.
Nothing else you want in there?
Well, we could have another clematis up that end. I love growing cuttings. One of the cuttings that I'm really proud of is this one here. It's called Atriplex. I like it very much because the colour of the leaves is such a soft colour, it moulds in with the things around it. Also, you can see the Thalictrum coming up in it, which is a wonderful combination of colour. We had a few white astrantias in the garden here, and without really thinking about it, I planted a dark red one on the other side of the path. And now we've got all sorts of colours. Things grow on and become special to you because they made their own way. You didn't do it, they did it. I open the garden on a Monday, just so local people might be able to just pop in. And if you've shared the garden, they feel they can share either their problems or their happiness. The garden is more than just for oneself.
Brenda, not only is your garden absolutely stunning, but I think the world's a better place for you in it. So we're back under my hawthorn hedge. I've improved the soil. I put a load of organic matter in the winter, and as you've seen, I've just put another layer of well-rotted manure over the top, just so this area does retain a little bit more moisture. So design-wise, when it comes to these plants, this is not flash colory, it's subtle, it relies a lot on leaf shapes, forms, pale colours to drift in and out as the year goes on. And in the daytime, at the moment, yeah, it's in full sun, but the dapple shade comes and goes. So now we've got them laid out, I will plant them. So at the back here, this is an Actea, and it's called Yesoensis, originally from Japan. You can see it's got a lovely sort of gloss to that foliage. In fact, let's give that a quick dip in that water. Good soaking. Probably a bit like I could do with on a day like this. This will flower probably in about July time. Little bottle brush type flowers. Now we come down to Regersea. A lot of people think this needs moisture. Well, if you're going to put it in a sunny spot, then yes it does. But the further into shade it goes, the less it needs. And that's Regersea pinnata elegans. And it's got this beautiful textured chestnut leaf. This is Dryoptis championi. I picked these up at Chelsea. Dryoptis are a great hard-working fern. This, they'll get to a couple of foot, but it will deal with slightly sunnier conditions. Beautiful textured foliage, fantastic contrast to the Regersea. But now we've got this. So this is Polygonatum, and it's Oriental, which I've been told is less susceptible to Solomon's seal sawfly. That grows to about 30 centimetres, and the flowers hang like bells earlier on in the year. And my little tip for getting water into this area, I've put my tanks in that get fed from my greenhouse. So what I'm going to do at the end of that tank is I'm going to file a little groove. So you imagine that tank fills up. There's going to be one point where the water comes out first. And that point will be just near that reducer. And this area gets more moisture without me having to worry about it. So there you go. Just look at the contrast. Shape, form, texture. Yeah, the flower will come and it will go. But there's still going to be interest there throughout the year. Now, still to come on today's programme. We pay a visit to a nursery preparing for this year's Royal Horticultural Society flower show, Tatton Park.
Judges say the plants have got to look like a plant on its wedding day, don't
Yes,
they?
yes, we like that. And that's what you always say to me, don't you? It's like, does this look like it's on its wedding day?
And Toby visits an extraordinary garden dedicated to water.
It's the amount of oxygen bubbling up off the foliage.
That's actually the oxygenated functions of the pondweed, and that's what keeps the pond healthy and clear as well.
But first, it's time for another one of your films.
Hello, Gardener's World. My name is Val, and welcome to my garden in sunny Thatcham in West Berkshire. Gradually over the years, gardening has just become more and more important, and no more so than the last 3 years when I've been recovering from cancer. It's just been a wonderful place to be, somewhere where I can just come and relax and chill and potter. Come and take a look. So we decided that rather than digging a border into all along the fence here, that we would create a border using pots and also using recycled pallets. We've got a bigger one here, and then we've got a smaller one over the other side, and then we've just filled it. We've used bath from our old bathroom and planted it up. The campanula that you can see there, it's spilling over the edge, and the bees absolutely love it. This is the latest addition to our garden for our feather friends to keep them cool in the summer, and it's made from a recycled hanging basket and also a recycled frying pan. So thanks very much for coming on this little tour with me. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're enjoying your garden. Wherever you are, I certainly enjoy mine, and it's definitely my happy place. Thanks very much, Gardener's World. Bye.
Val, I'm so pleased to hear that the garden is really helping you. And I'm with you 100%. Recycle, upcycle, don't throw anything away. That's exactly what this is, an old water tank that I'm going to give a new lease of life. I think in this garden, I'm ready now to start adding water. And I've not really got room to put in a big feature. So I'm going to create a series of destinations all around the garden. The actual thing is probably nearly 1 metre across, and then it's about 1 foot deep. When it comes to the depth, I probably wouldn't go any shallower than that. So what I've done is I've levelled it and then filled this 5 days ago, because what I want to do is let the chlorine just leave the water. Some of these plants will not like being put in water from a tap that is carrying chlorine. So I'm going to put 2 marginals in, and then 1 water lily and an oxygenator. With the 2 marginals, the top of the pot needs to be about 50 mil under the water. So at the back there, where I'm going to put them, I'm just going to build it up with gravel. One of the things with this feature, because it's not very deep, I don't want it to overheat. So one of the reasons I've put it where it is slowly this magnolia will come over the top of it, it will shade it. That means that it won't heat up too much. I've used an aquatic basket, which is a perforated black pot, but inside is aquatic compost, which is really low in nutrients. Potted up my common rush, and then gravel on top, and that will stop the compost going everywhere. Let's just check for level. Imagine that's going to be full up, so that'll be spot on. Then this is the marsh marigold. Check that for level. That'll bring another yellow flower to the game. Both of these are native and incredibly good for wildlife. So next up is the water lily. So this is a dwarf water lily and it's called Perry's Baby Red. What you don't want to do is drown them. So what I mean by that is when you lower your water lily in, if those leaves disappear under the water, you're going to have to put something underneath that pot and then over a few days lower the pot, and you'll find that eventually you'll get to the correct height. And now what I want to do is start to build beaches. So I start with larger cobbles, and what I'm doing is building up around the marginals, and what they're going to do is they're going to create nooks and crannies, places where the wildlife can hide themselves away. But also things want to move around, and you want to create even smaller voids. So I go down a couple of sizes, so that's probably about 20, 25 mil, but I'm not stopping there. So now we're going to go down to about 5, 10 mil, but only in places. I'm not going to do this everywhere. You want a little beach, you want things to be able to get in and out. And the last, but probably the most important thing in any water feature, is the oxygenator. This is hornwort. That is going to be the key to provide oxygen. I will finish that over the next few days, but water gardening can become a bit of an obsession with people, as Toby found out last summer.
We all know that adding water to your space can have a huge impact on wildlife. Even 1 or 2 small ponds can make a big difference. But what happens when you have 7? Andre Schott has done exactly that, creating an extraordinary water meadow behind his semi-detached home in the suburbs of Milton Keynes. The thing that strikes me is I've been to lots of gardens where there's a pond in the corner, but when did you decide to put your garden in the corner of a pond?
I grew up in Holland fishing from when I was very small, walking around the pond's edges with a net. So when it came to making a garden, I think for me that was the first thing that I wanted to do, was like to have this experience of walking through a wetland, have water plants and ponds everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that was really my inspiration.
Well, you've ticked that box and then some, haven't you? I mean, this is incredible.
I've gone a bit nuts.
That must have taken quite a bit of bravery to turn on the tap and create this.
The scariest part was obviously when I had the digger come in and dug the holes, and it was like, 4 enormous trucks with those grabbers, and the amount of soil that came out, and when they left, there was like massive craters in my garden, and there was a lot of sun coming down. It's clay soil, and the heat of the sun was cracking up the clay, and it was all kind of falling down again. And every night I had to go in with a hose just to keep the edges damp before the liner could go in. I think that was the worst time. That was a really scary time. I think, what have I done, And even now, sometimes I think, who's ever going to buy this house, Do you come and look?
Yeah. Walking through Andre's garden, you're surrounded on all sides by sound and movement. The ripples of water under feet, the rustling, swaying reeds, and everywhere the buzzing of insects flitting from pond to pond. It's a totally immersive experience. I mean, the thing about ponds is that everyone knows you put them in, the wildlife will come. I mean, was that your intention?
I wanted to be managed, looking good, but of course, something that really attracts nature and is full of wildlife.
Yeah, an ornamental garden that's easy on the eye, that also happens to have another whole layer of life to it.
It is amazing, yeah. From within weeks, with literally 2 weeks, you've got insects coming. Kind of a year later, 2 years later, I've actually got bats in my attic. To me, that's just kind of probably a sign that, the ponds are creating an ecosystem. And I think it's just fantastic, yeah.
What's really interesting here is that you've created not just a large body of water, but different habitats through different depths. I mean, how deep is this pond?
At its deepest, it's 80 centimetres.
Okay.
And that just helps with the stability, so less likely to get algae than if your pond was just sort of a shallow pond sitting in the full sun. And then along the edges, the ponds are shallower.
The abundance of wildlife makes this space feel more like a living landscape than a garden, and Andre has increased this effect by applying tried and tested garden tricks to his whole water meadow.
This is an extraordinary garden. There are so many clever design ideas here. This part of the garden is called the reed beds, and what's remarkable is the plants die right down to their ankles in winter, and then in high summer they come up like a jungle to head height. Now what that does is that it blurs the boundaries of the garden, turning what is a modest space into something that seems like, wow, it's endless. There's some lovely runners and riders here. This is Eupatorium, pink flowers, loved by butterflies. They turn to these lovely fluffy seed heads later on. There are reeds here as well. This is a variegated form of the Norfolk reed, and just as you might see it by the side of a road or growing in a creek or a swamp, it's got its feet in water. And this is the clever bit. It's growing cheek by jowl with a plant that looks just like it. But this is a North American prairie plant. It's called Panicum virgatum. A variety called squaw or switchgrass, and it is growing in the soil and can cope with quite dry conditions. And the clever thing here is that it looks just like the reed, and to the eye it makes it look like there's far more water here than there actually is. Genius.
The strength of Andre's planting is that although it's very dense, he's kept the range of plants relatively restricted, repeating plants like this iris over and over again to increase their impact.
Another key plant in this garden is this. It's the willow leaf sunflower. It was a remarkable thing actually, because it dies down to ground in winter and then grows these magnificent tall stems covered in this lovely cascading foliage. At the back end of the year, from October, you get golden flowers on the top, and the foliage itself turns a lovely butter yellow. Really good autumn colour. But actually, the star of the show at this time of year is loosestrife. This is a variety called Dropmore Purple. This is a really good wildlife plant because for months at the back end of the summer, just when nectar supplies are running low, this plant is in full bloom and doing its thing. It's one of these amphibious flowers, growing in the soil and also up to its knees in the water. And so it blurs the lines of where the ponds end and the borders begin.
Throughout the garden, Andre has made the most of the space below the water as well as above it, filling the ponds with texture and interest, which draws you down towards the water and asks you to look deeper under the surface.
I mean, this is a beautiful picture, isn't there? So much going on.
That was the idea for me, to have it almost like a pond, also like an underwater scape going on, like an aquarium you can view from above. Yeah. And I'm actually also using some aquarium plants. So over there you can see the giant vallis. And what we're looking at here is called a shining pondweed. You can see the leaves a little bit white, and that's like a calcium deposit. But if you kind of go over, and you can just, you know, with your hands, just take off the calcium, and it's quite an amazing leaf. You know, it's quite you know, a nice texture.
Yes, I mean, it's almost like lace, isn't it? One of the things I've really noticed, I've hardly ever noticed in a pond before, because you're normally looking at them obliquely, so the light stops you looking into the depths.
Yeah.
It's the amount of oxygen bubbling up off the foliage.
That's actually the oxygenated functions of the pondweed, and that's what keeps the pond healthy and clear as well, because the plants in the pond are constant battle against the algae. If you didn't have plants, your water would just turn green.
This garden's so inspirational, Andre. I should imagine anyone who sees it thinks, I want one of those. What's the key lesson? How do you get this look?
I think the main thing is, don't just think about a pond having to be somewhere right at the back that's overgrown. Have it in the centre of your garden, have it at the front of your garden. Build your garden around the pond and integrate the pond with the flower bed. So it's not just, here's the pond, here's the garden, and there's a sort of difference between the two. It should be integrated, it should be one thing to look at and appreciate.
Well, you know what they say. I think this is a professional horticultural thing.
Yeah.
Where the Dutch go, the rest of us follow.
Oh, thank you very much, Toby. Well, anytime, you're welcome to come back.
Oh, I will. I'll take you up on that.
Thank you.
Andre, I think that was a very brave thing to do, but what a garden. Now, see that? Celery. It would be quite happy as a marginal plant around one of Andre's ponds. Not necessarily in a veg garden in a very dry part of the country. But as we know, I do like a challenge. So this is soil that I put a load of well-rotted manure in last autumn, and I've let it work down. So the first thing I want to do is add a load more. And then we're going to work that in again. This plant really does not want to dry out. Why am I bothering? Because I do like Italian cooking, and it is one of the bases for so many of those recipes. Next thing, mud. Mud, glorious mud. Kids would love this. So now I've created a lovely little muddy patch. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to put this quite close together. It's only about sort of 15, 20 centimetres. And just work your way along. The old-fashioned way would have been to put a trench and then bury them slowly, and you would start to blanch the plant. Or sometimes you'd see people would put cardboard all the way around them. Whereas these are self-blanching. So it means I can put them in at ground level, plant them in a block so that they protect each other. It does help. I think as well with this is this surrounding planting. You know, the water doesn't leave this area so quickly. I'm hoping that actually my courgettes will start to cover the ground, the raspberries will get a little bit bigger, and the evaporation won't be as bad. So that's my little muddy little patch of celery. I won't let that dry out, and probably in a couple of months' time I'll be harvesting some lovely celery to add to the Italian dishes. Would you believe it is only 4 weeks to the RHS Flower Show, Tatton Park? I know, time is flying. So we are off to the Peak District to meet Myri and Sonia Longdon, who have been busy preparing for the show.
The landscape in Derbyshire is rolling hills, very green, and what we grow tends to reflect that a little bit. I mean, the soil here is amazing. The soil is lovely black loam. It's obviously just a really good growing area. Things like hardy geraniums and sanguisugum and things like that grow well up here natively. It makes sense to try and cultivate them as well.
You've also got the herbs that you've moved into and veg.
We've got a tunnel, we've got glass, but I don't use any heat or anything, so everything's grown pretty naturally. We specialise pretty much in hardy perennials here in Tittington, and this is one of my favourites. I love hardy geraniums, I've always loved them, and this one's Geranium silestemon. Grows about 2.5, 3 foot high, makes a really good clump, so it's a good middle of the border plant and a stunning colour, as you can see. You find with the geraniums that the more cut leaf, the more sun they'll tolerate, so the bigger leaf varieties like Geranium phaeum, happy in the shade. This has got quite a broad leaf, as you can see, so it'll tolerate a little bit more shade than some varieties. And things like Geranium Brookside have got a really fine leaf, like a sunnier position.
I always say that I'm apprentice waterer because I have a full-time job, but it needs all hands on deck when the season starts. And so I've listened to Myri over the last 8 years. I think I'm progressing through the apprenticeship now.
It's a very long apprenticeship, isn't it? The nursery started, I think it was the late 80s, by a couple called Derek and Sue. It's the old kitchen garden for the estate, and it was very run down then. They did a lot of work. And then in 2006, they decided they were going to retire, and I got the opportunity to take the nursery on.
It's really important that it's a family-run nursery. You know, your mum was here, I help. We've got a daughter, she comes and helps.
I still get a kick even now. I think this is my 17th year. People want to buy a plant off me and take it home, put it in their garden and enjoy it. I think it just feels it's like a warm fuzzy feeling. But it is really nice that you've nurtured something and they want to take it home and nurture it themselves. Amongst the perennials that we're taking to Tatton are a lot of pollinators. This is Achillea pomegranate. It's a lovely pinky purple variety, makes about a couple of feet high. Not particularly good for bees and butterflies, but it's great for hoverflies, which are also important pollinators. Another couple of things are Verbena bonariensis, makes about 3 or 4 foot high, lovely little pom-poms and absolutely stunning for butterflies and bees, and good late sort of nectar source because it flowers right on into the autumn. And another variety is Helenium. They're great for late season nectar as well. Nice flat daisy flowers in lovely rich orange yellow colours. Yeah, 3 really good pollinating plants. This year at Tatton, we're going to take a little bit of Derbyshire with us. A stone wall again, a nice stone path up the middle planted with some things which will grow up here, things like the thymes and stuff grow happily in the Peak District.
We want to be quintessentially Tissington though.
Yeah.
It's nice, as we've built up over the years at the shows, people come to see us. This is my favourite. There'll be a bike, I think, this year. Somebody's having a picnic. We like to have a theme, a story behind who's here, who's visiting us, what does this look like for when people come. We want them to be excited as well. So these are some of the plants we're taking to Tatton.
First up, we've got the Sanguisorba lilac squirrel, always a favourite at the shows. Nice bit of height, lovely flowers, nice arching pink, sort of almost like a bottle bush, really pretty, nice red stems.
So in terms of design, they're going to go either in the centre or
more
give us the height?
Yeah, more to the middle and the back, gives a bit of height, and a bit of an undulation as well, and that helps with that.
The Astrantia's going, isn't it?
Yeah, this is Astrantia roma. Always flowers really well, and dead-headed, it'll just flower and flower and flower.
Judges say the plants have got to look like a plant on its wedding day, don't they?
Yes, we like that. And that's what you always say to me, don't you? It's like, does this look like it's on its wedding day?
And I know that you like grasses, don't you?
I love grasses.
So
nice bit of
movement. Tidying up.
Yeah.
So all this dead stuff needs to come off, doesn't it, for the show?
Yeah, when we do the show, we have to make sure all the dead heads are taken off, any yellow leaves, and obviously all this needs to be clean so it's nice and tidy and looking like it's on its wedding day, like you say. Grasses are great because they give a bit of movement. They're completely different shape from a lot of the other perennials because obviously they've got a narrow leaf, very upright habit. And I've sneaked in a few little thymes.
Oh, yeah, here's
yeah.
one.
We like to have a little sort of gravel area often in our show gardens. A little bit of practicality really, because when you're having to maintain the display during the week to get on to water, deadhead, various things, you need something to stand on. You don't want to actually be standing on all of your plants, so a little pathway is dead useful for that. So the thymes are ideal for just bobbing into the gravel, break it up a little bit, soften edges. We just put them into nice big pots, so by the time we get to Tatton, they're probably going to double in size at least. You find when you've sort of done a year or two doing the shows, you think, oh, I've got plenty of plants, and actually you haven't. It seems to swallow them somehow. We've had a couple of silvers and 4 silver gilts at the shows. We're trying to go for gold desperately, and I think you have to develop. I know people walk in and they'll get a gold medal straight away, but then you've got to maintain that. I'd rather learn from my mistakes and build up from the silver to the silver gilt and then to the gold, and then know how I've got there, rather than it just be a fluke.
We'd be overjoyed with
We would
gold.
be, I really, really would. I mean, it's the pinnacle of horticulture. I mean, I'm a small little nursery in Derbyshire and I'm playing with some of the biggest nurseries and biggest names in the country, and to be up there with them is an absolute privilege. So yeah, gold medal would be amazing.
I'm sure that gold medal will come. And RHS Tatton will be open from Wednesday the 19th till Sunday the 23rd of July. Look at that, for a combination. It's geranium blue cloud with peony, bowl of beauty, and that is a bowl of beauty. Sometimes people are a little bit sniffy about peonies and they say, oh yeah, but they go over too quickly. For me, you're missing the point. That moment of joy, that's what gardening is all about. But also it's time just to get in and give it a little bit of deadheading. There's still loads of buds to come. And that'll just help. So while I'm getting on with that, here's a few jobs you could be doing at the weekend. If you sowed your carrots a couple of months ago, there's a good chance that they'll need thinning out now. Aim to leave about 1 centimetre between each one, removing any weeds as you go. The smell of the thinnings will attract female carrot flies from far and wide. So it's best to do it in the evening if you can, and cover the crop with fleece or fine mesh afterwards. To help keep your topiary looking neat and tidy, it's a good idea to give it a haircut at this time of year. And with curved specimens like this yew dome, I find that a sharp pair of shears used the wrong way round works a treat. And when you're done, simply collect up your clippings and add them to your compost heap. In a good year, apples and pears can become laden with too much fruit, some of which will fall to the ground as part of the June drop. But if the fruitlets still look overcrowded as they start to swell, thin to 1 or 2 fruits per cluster. This will help prevent the branches from breaking and improve the overall size and quality of your fruit. Well, I'm afraid that is about it from us this week, isn't it, young man? Yes, he says. But Monty will be back next week at Longmeadow at 9 o'clock. In the meantime, look after yourselves. You going to say goodbye? You got your back to them. It's a bit rude. Say bye-bye. You are funny.
Yes, that's Monty next Friday. Weeds and seeds, slugs and bugs, roots and shoots. Fear not. Monty Adam Alan Titchmarsh on hand, the Gardener's World Problem Solver, is available now. Glastonbury 2023 Live is next.